It was late evening and the little restaurant was quiet. The owner had spent the entire day cooking, serving, and cleaning. His arms ached and his legs felt heavy, but he loved what he did. Even though it was tiring, there was something satisfying about seeing people enjoy the food he had worked so hard to prepare. The smell of spices still lingered in the air, a mix of warmth and comfort, like the feeling of being home after a long day. As he wiped the counters and stacked the last of the dishes, he noticed movement outside through the restaurant window. Two figures were huddled together near the edge of the street. It was unusual to see anyone out at this hour, especially standing in the cold. He squinted to see clearly. There was an old woman bent with age and a small child clinging to her side. The wind blew through the street and he could see the thin coat on the woman shivering against the chill. The child had on a small jacket, worn at the edges, and his tiny hands were wrapped around the woman's arm as if seeking protection. For a moment, the owner hesitated. He had rules about who could stay in the restaurant, and he worried about safety. But something about the sight stopped him. The old woman looked exhausted, and the child's eyes were wide, filled with fear and uncertainty. The owner's heart tightened. He had grown up hearing stories of people who struggled quietly, hidden from the world, and he felt a pang of empathy. Without thinking too much, he walked toward the door. "Excuse me," he called softly, careful not to startle them. The woman looked up, and he could see the weariness etched on her face. Her eyes were kind but tired, and for a moment it felt like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. The child looked at him cautiously but did not move away. "Hello?" he said gently. "It's late and it's cold outside. Would you like to come in for some food?" The woman's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Thank you. We haven't eaten in a long time. We have nowhere to go tonight." The owner nodded. "You can stay here for a little while. Come inside and warm up." He led them through the restaurant to a small corner that had been used for storage. It wasn't much, a few chairs, a small cot, and some blankets, but it was safe and warm. The woman thanked him again, her voice trembling, and the child finally relaxed, leaning against her as if he had been carrying a heavy burden all day. The owner went back to the kitchen and quickly prepared a simple meal. He knew it wasn't fancy, but it was warm and filling. He brought a plate of rice, vegetables, and a little chicken and set it in front of them. The smell seemed to bring the woman back to life. She smiled, a rare and fragile thing, and the child's eyes lit up as he took a careful bite. They ate quietly at first, the sound of chewing the only noise in the otherwise empty restaurant. Then the woman began to speak, sharing a little of their story. She told him how she had lost her home after a sudden illness had drained all her savings. She had tried to find work, but in her age it was nearly impossible. Her grandson had been her light through it all, but she struggled every day to provide even the smallest comforts. The owner listened, feeling a mix of sadness and admiration. He admired her courage and resilience. Many people would have given up, but she kept going, doing everything she could for the child. He glanced at the boy, who was shy but curious. The child looked at the restaurant around him with wide eyes, fascinated by the pots, the flames on the stove, and the colorful plates on the shelves. After the meal, he brought them a couple of blankets and showed them where they could rest. The woman carefully tucked the child in first, then wrapped herself in the blanket. The owner could see the relief in their faces as they finally relaxed. For a brief moment, the world outside seemed far away, and there was only the warmth and safety of the restaurant. As he cleaned the last dishes, the owner's mind wandered. He thought about his own life, how busy he always was, always thinking about running the business, paying bills, and keeping everything in order. He realized he had been so focused on his own struggles that he often overlooked the struggles of others. Tonight had reminded him of something important. Kindness was powerful. A small act could make a huge difference in someone's life. Hours passed, and the restaurant grew silent. The streets outside were empty, and only the occasional car passed by. He checked on the woman and child before heading to his own small room behind the restaurant. They were both asleep, safe and warm for the first time in days. He felt a strange sense of peace, a quiet happiness that he hadn't expected. Sleep came to him slowly that night. He kept thinking about the stories the woman had shared, the child's bright eyes and the fragile hope that still lived in them. He thought about the world outside the restaurant where so many people struggled silently, and wondered how many others were out there, waiting for a kind gesture, waiting for someone to notice them. By the time the morning light began to seep through the windows, he had made a decision. He didn't know what the future would bring, but he knew he couldn't turn them away again. He wanted to do more, not just for this grandmother and child, but for anyone who needed help. That small act of kindness had awakened something in him, a realization that life was about more than just business and money. When the woman and child woke up, they were surprised to find breakfast waiting for them. The owner smiled warmly. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well. Here's some food before you head out." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I know," he replied. "But I wanted to. Sometimes everyone just needs a little help." The child, shy at first, offered a small, grateful smile. He had been scared and uncertain yesterday, but now he seemed lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. They ate together in quiet companionship, sharing small smiles and gentle conversation. The restaurant no longer felt like just a business. It felt like a home, a place where people could find comfort and kindness. Before leaving, the woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small handmade scarf. She handed it to the owner. "It's not much," she said, "but it's made with care. Thank you for everything." He accepted it, touched by the gesture. "Thank you. You don't have to go anywhere right now. You're always welcome here." As they stepped outside into the morning light, the owner felt a strange mix of emotions: joy, gratitude, and a quiet determination. That one night had changed something in him. He didn't know yet how much, but he knew it had set something important in motion. Little did he know. This simple decision to offer a meal and a warm place to stay would not just change the lives of the grandmother and child, but would ripple into his own life in ways he could never imagine. And it all began with noticing two figures standing in the cold and deciding that kindness was more important than worry or rules. The sun rose higher, casting its light over the streets and the small restaurant. Inside, the aroma of fresh bread and coffee filled the air. The owner looked around at the little space he had created, a space where warmth and compassion could exist. For the first time in a long while, he felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be. He knew life would continue to bring challenges, as it always did, but now he understood something new. The smallest gestures, the quietest acts of humanity, had the power to change everything. And tonight, or maybe even tomorrow, he would discover just how true that could be. The day after the grandmother and child spent the night in the restaurant, life seemed to return to normal. The owner opened his little restaurant in the morning, greeting his regular customers with a smile. Yet something felt different inside him. The events of the previous night lingered in his mind, like a gentle reminder of what really mattered in life. He couldn't shake the image of the fragile woman and the small child, huddled together in the cold. By mid-morning, the grandmother returned, this time bringing the child along more confidently. She looked tired, but her eyes carried a spark that hadn't been there before. The child held her hand tightly, but he seemed more relaxed, even curious about the restaurant. It was clear that their one-night stay had meant more to them than the owner could have imagined. "Good morning," he said warmly, placing a cup of hot tea in front of the woman and a small plate of pancakes for the child. "I'm glad to see you both again." "Thank you," the woman replied softly. "For everything yesterday, it was more than we expected." They ate quietly at first. The child was shy, picking at the pancakes, but occasionally looking around with wide eyes at the colorful dishes, the steaming pots, and the busy kitchen. The woman watched him with a gentle smile, clearly concerned for his comfort but grateful for the little respite the restaurant offered. After a while, the woman began to open up about their situation. She explained that they had been traveling for days, trying to find someone who could help them even a little. She didn't want to ask strangers for money or charity, but they were desperate. Her voice wavered, but it was clear she was determined to do everything for her grandson. The owner listened quietly, offering words of comfort when he could. "You don't have to feel ashamed," he said gently. "Everyone needs help sometimes. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." The grandmother nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Most people ignore us. They pass by and pretend they don't see. But you stopped and helped. That means more than you know." The child, now finishing his pancakes, finally spoke. His voice was small, hesitant, but there was honesty in it. "Thank you," he said simply. "I feel safe here." Hearing the words, the owner felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in a long time. It was strange how such small gestures could create such a profound impact. He realized that his life had been full of routines, of checking schedules, making sure bills were paid, and ensuring the restaurant ran smoothly. But all of that seemed less important when compared to the human connections he had been overlooking. After breakfast, the grandmother asked if they could stay a little longer, just to rest. The owner hesitated. He had work to do and there were other responsibilities. But when he looked at the tired faces, he couldn't say no. He prepared a small corner with blankets, pillows, and a chair, making it as comfortable as he could with the space available. The grandmother and child settled in, and for a few hours there was quiet. The child drew little pictures on scraps of paper, while the grandmother quietly rested, her eyes closing in relief. While they rested, the owner walked around the restaurant, thinking about what he could do to help them further. He realized that this situation wasn't just about a meal or a place to sleep for one night. These people needed more than temporary help. They needed hope, stability, and someone who believed in them. As the afternoon sun filtered through the windows, the owner brought out a small basket of fresh fruit and snacks. He placed it in front of them and said, "Take whatever you want. You don't have to wait for a meal." The child's eyes widened with delight. He picked a piece of fruit and held it carefully, almost as if it were a treasure. The grandmother smiled, touched by the gesture. "You are very kind," she said. "Most people don't think of others like this." Later, as the restaurant grew quieter, the owner decided to join them in their small corner. He sat on the floor listening to the grandmother tell more about her life. She spoke about her late husband, the struggles of raising a family, and the many obstacles that had come her way. Each story revealed her resilience, her determination, and the love she had for her grandson. The child, now more comfortable, showed the owner some of his drawings. They were simple, yet full of imagination. Trees, houses, animals, and small scenes of life he dreamed about. The owner was amazed. There was talent in those small hands, creativity and hope shining through despite the hardships they had faced. "You're very talented," the owner said softly. "Have you ever thought about drawing more? Or maybe showing your work to others?" The child's eyes lit up with curiosity. I like drawing," he said quietly. "But I don't have paper or colors at home." The owner smiled. "Well, maybe we can fix that." The conversation continued for hours. The owner realized that this simple connection, the act of sharing food, a place to rest, and attention, was changing something inside all of them. The grandmother looked calmer than she had in weeks. The child was beginning to feel confident, and the owner himself felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. As the evening approached, the restaurant started to fill with regular customers. The owner prepared for dinner, but he kept glancing toward the corner where the grandmother and child sat. He wanted them to feel welcome, even as the restaurant returned to its normal rhythm. He realized that kindness didn't have to disrupt life. It could exist alongside it quietly, making everything better. Later, as the restaurant emptied and the night grew quiet again, the grandmother spoke softly. "We don't want to overstay," she said. "We are so grateful, but we don't want to be a burden." The owner shook his head. "You are not a burden. Everyone deserves kindness, and sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places. You don't have to leave just because you think you should." For the first time in many nights, the grandmother smiled fully, not the fragile smile of someone trying to hide exhaustion, but a genuine smile of relief and gratitude. The child, now yawning, leaned against her. "Can we stay a little longer?" he whispered. The owner nodded. "Of course. You're safe here." That night, the restaurant became more than a place to eat. It became a sanctuary. The old woman and child slept peacefully wrapped in blankets while the owner sat nearby reflecting on the day. He thought about his own life, the choices he had made, and the routines he had followed. He realized that sometimes the simplest actions, offering food, a place to rest, a listening ear, could create ripples far beyond what he imagined. He remembered the child's drawings, the spark of creativity, and the grandmother's quiet strength. He thought about how easily people could go unnoticed, how many faces in the streets carried hidden stories of struggle and hope. And he knew that he wanted to be someone who noticed, someone who helped, someone who made a difference. As midnight approached, he quietly checked on them one last time. The grandmother was sleeping with her hand resting on the child's shoulder, and the child's small hand was curled around hers. They looked peaceful, safe, and cared for. The owner felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had not only fed them but had given them comfort, respect, and dignity. And in return, they had given him something equally valuable, a reminder of what it meant to be human, to care, to connect. Before going to his own small room to rest, he left a small plate of water and some snacks near their corner, so they would not wake hungry. He quietly whispered, "Good night. Tomorrow will be a new day." As he lay down, sleep came slowly. His mind wandered through the events of the day, replaying moments of laughter, gratitude, and quiet reflection. He felt a growing determination inside him. This was only the beginning. He wanted to do more, not just for this grandmother and child, but for anyone who needed help. The realization brought a sense of hope, not just for them, but for himself as well. In the early hours of the morning, the first rays of sunlight crept into the restaurant. The owner awoke with a sense of purpose. He looked toward the corner where the grandmother and child still slept peacefully. The night had been long, but it had been meaningful. It had reminded him of the power of compassion, of human connection, and of the small but profound ways one life could touch another. The child stirred, waking with a yawn, and the grandmother smiled at him. They looked at the owner together, silently communicating their gratitude. No words were needed. In that moment, the bond between them felt unspoken but strong. The owner knew that their brief time together had already begun to change him, shaping his understanding of kindness and responsibility in ways he had never imagined. He prepared for the day, determined to continue supporting them in any way he could. He thought about small things he could do: a warm meal, art supplies for the child, maybe even help the grandmother find work or shelter. The possibilities seemed endless, and yet, all of it felt achievable because he understood one simple truth. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness could grow into something extraordinary. The day ahead promised challenges, but also opportunities. And the owner felt ready. For the first time in a long while, he felt not just like someone running a restaurant, but like someone making a real difference in the world, one life at a time. The days passed quietly, but the restaurant had a new sense of life in it. The owner noticed a change, not in the customers or the food, but inside himself. Something about helping the grandmother and the child had opened a part of his heart he didn't realize was closed. Each morning he found himself thinking about them, wondering if they were safe, if they had enough to eat, if the child's small smile was still bright. One afternoon, the grandmother returned with the child, holding his hand as they stepped into the warm restaurant. The child's eyes sparkled with curiosity, and he looked around as if everything was new. The grandmother nodded politely to the owner. "We hope it's okay," she said softly. "We just wanted to visit, even for a little while." The owner's heart warmed. "Of course. You're welcome any time," he said. He led them to a small corner where they could sit comfortably. The child immediately began to sketch on a scrap piece of paper he had brought along, his little hands moving carefully, drawing houses, trees, and small animals. The grandmother smiled, clearly proud of him, and the owner felt a deep admiration for both of them. As they settled in, the grandmother shared a small story. "When my grandson was very little, I promised him that one day he would have everything he needed to follow his dreams," she said. Her voice wavered, but there was determination in her eyes. "I've tried my best, but life hasn't been kind. Still, I want him to believe that good things can happen, even when it seems impossible." The owner listened carefully, feeling a lump in his throat. He realized that this woman had carried so much on her own, yet she continued to hope, to fight, and to care for the child. He looked at the child, who was shyly showing him a drawing of a small restaurant with smiling people inside. The boy's imagination and innocence struck a chord in the owner's heart. "You draw really well," he said softly. "Have you ever thought about doing more with your art?" The child hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I like drawing, but I don't have paper or colors at home." The owner smiled. "Well, we can fix that. You should never stop doing something you love." That small conversation planted a seed of hope. The owner realized that helping them wasn't just about feeding them or giving them a place to sleep. It was about giving them a chance to dream, to grow, to feel that life could be brighter. He wanted to do more than just meet their basic needs. He wanted to help them see a future full of possibilities. As the afternoon passed, the restaurant grew busier with regular customers. But the owner found himself watching the grandmother and child quietly from the kitchen. Their presence had brought a sense of warmth and joy to the space. Even the staff noticed. One of the waiters leaned over and whispered, "They seem different." "There's something happy about them," the owner nodded. "Yes, and it's a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest change." Later that evening, when the restaurant had quieted down, the grandmother approached the owner. "I don't know how to thank you enough," she said softly. "You welcomed us without hesitation. Most people wouldn't even stop. You made us feel human again." "You don't have to thank me," the owner replied. "I did what I felt was right. That's all." She paused, then handed him a small piece of paper folded neatly. "This is a drawing my grandson made for you. He said it's a thank you picture for making him feel safe." The owner unfolded it carefully. It was a simple drawing but full of color and life. A small house with a smiling family inside, a bright sun overhead, and trees all around. He felt a warmth spread through him. It wasn't just a drawing. It was a message, a reminder that his small gesture had created hope and happiness. The child shyly added, "I wanted you to have it. Because you helped us." The owner knelt down to the child's level. "I will treasure it," he said. "It's very special. And I hope you keep drawing no matter what happens." After they left that night, the owner couldn't stop thinking about them. He realized that the connection he had formed wasn't temporary. It had already begun to shape the way he thought about life, kindness, and community. He started to consider ways he could continue helping, not just for these two, but for others who needed a little hope. The next day, the owner brought in a small set of drawing supplies, colored pencils, markers, and paper, and left them in a quiet corner of the restaurant. The child's eyes lit up when he saw them. For the first time in a long while, he had the tools to express himself fully. The grandmother's gratitude was quiet but deep, and she whispered to the owner, "You've given him a gift beyond words." The owner watched as the child began to draw, his small hands moving confidently across the paper. Each stroke was a story, a dream, a piece of his imagination coming to life. It was incredible to see someone so young, facing so much hardship, still finding joy in something as simple as drawing. The owner felt inspired. He realized that even in a world full of struggles, people could create beauty and hope. Word about the grandmother and child slowly spread among the regular customers. Some offered small donations of clothes, blankets, and food. Others brought toys or books for the child. The owner noticed how quickly people's hearts opened when they saw genuine kindness. It was as if the act of helping these two had created a ripple effect, inspiring others to be generous as well. One afternoon, as the restaurant was quieter than usual, the grandmother shared a memory from her past. "When I was young, someone helped me when I had nothing. They gave me food, warmth, and hope. I never forgot it. That memory kept me going all these years, and now you've given that same gift to my grandson and me." The owner felt a lump in his throat. He realized that life wasn't only about work, bills, or personal success. It was about these moments of human connection, of compassion, of hope. He understood that helping others could bring fulfillment that money or status never could. As weeks went by, the child became more confident, more comfortable in the restaurant. He would greet customers shyly, showing them some of his drawings and sometimes even helping with small tasks like folding napkins or arranging utensils. The grandmother watched with pride, her face lighting up whenever he smiled. The owner began to notice changes in himself too. He found himself more patient, more empathetic, and more willing to see the needs of others. He started thinking beyond just running a restaurant. He wanted to create a small community, a space where people could feel safe, cared for, and valued. The experience with the grandmother and child had opened his eyes to a new way of living, one where kindness was as important as profit, and compassion was as valuable as hard work. One evening, after closing the restaurant, the grandmother stayed behind to talk. "I know you have your life, your work, and your responsibilities," she said. "But the way you have welcomed us, it has changed everything for us. You've shown us that kindness still exists in this world." "You've taught me something too," the owner replied. "You and your grandson have reminded me what really matters. Life isn't just about running a business or earning money. It's about caring for others, even in small ways. And those small ways can change lives." The child, who had been quietly drawing, looked up and said, "I want to help people too, like you do." The owner smiled, his heart swelling. "And you will," he said. "You already are in your own way." From that day on, the restaurant became more than a place to eat. It became a small haven, a space where people in need could find warmth, food, and a listening ear. The owner encouraged his staff to treat everyone with kindness, and he quietly made room for those who needed shelter or a hot meal. The grandmother and child continued to visit regularly. Each time they came, they brought a little more joy, a little more light, and a little more inspiration. The child's drawings became a fixture on the walls of the restaurant, reminding everyone who came of hope, resilience, and the power of compassion. The owner began to see a bigger picture. He realized that life was full of opportunities to help, to connect, and to make a difference. And he knew that this experience, the one night he had opened his heart to a grandmother and child, was just the beginning. He looked at the child's latest drawing, a bright scene of a small restaurant filled with smiling people, and felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. It was more than art. It was a message. A message that life could be better, brighter, and more meaningful when people cared for one another. The grandmother, noticing his gaze, whispered, "You've made a difference in our lives." "More than you know," the owner nodded quietly. He didn't need words. The smiles, the drawings, the laughter of the child, they said everything. And in that moment, he understood that sometimes the smallest gestures of kindness could grow into something extraordinary, something that could change not just one life, but many. Weeks had passed since the grandmother and child first arrived at the restaurant. The bond between them and the owner had grown stronger with each day. What started as a simple act of kindness had begun to transform the restaurant, the people around it, and even the owner himself. It was no longer just a place to eat. It had become a small haven of hope and connection. One afternoon, the grandmother returned with the child, looking more confident than before. She carried a letter in her hands, and her face was a mix of anticipation and nervousness. The child held her hand tightly, but he walked with a quiet excitement, as if he knew something important was about to happen. The owner welcomed them warmly. "It's good to see you again," he said. "What brings you here today?" The grandmother hesitated for a moment, then handed him the letter. "We received this from an organization that helps families and children with talent. They noticed my grandson's drawings and want to support him. They said he has potential and could have a brighter future if given the right guidance." The owner took the letter, reading it carefully. He felt a surge of pride and happiness. The child had been working hard on his drawings, often sharing them quietly in the restaurant, never expecting recognition. And now, someone outside their small world had seen his talent and wanted to help. "This is wonderful," the owner said softly, looking at the child. "You've worked hard and now people are noticing. You deserve this." The grandmother smiled through her tears. "We couldn't have done this without you. You gave us a place to rest, hope when we had none, and a sense of safety. You believed in us when no one else did." The owner shook his head. "I didn't do anything special. I just did what anyone should do. But seeing you two move forward, it's more rewarding than I can describe." That day marked a turning point. The owner realized that helping the grandmother and child was not just a one-time act. It could create lasting change. He decided he wanted to support the child's talent personally. He began talking to friends, customers, and local suppliers, quietly gathering resources to provide art materials, mentorship, and guidance. The community responded positively, inspired by the story of kindness and resilience that had unfolded in the restaurant. The child's excitement was contagious. Each day he would arrive at the restaurant with new drawings and ideas, eager to learn and improve. The grandmother watched with pride, often commenting on how the child's confidence and joy had grown. She confided in the owner one day, "I've never seen him this happy. You've changed his life just by believing in him and giving him a little encouragement." The owner realized that the impact of his small gesture extended far beyond what he could see. It had not only helped the grandmother and child survive, but had given them the tools and confidence to dream bigger. And in doing so, it had changed him as well. He started looking for other ways to make a difference, even in small ways, offering free meals to those who couldn't afford them, donating food to nearby shelters, and encouraging his staff to participate. One day, as the restaurant quieted after lunch, the grandmother approached the owner with a small, thoughtful proposal. "You've done so much for us," she said. But maybe we can do something together to help others too. There are so many people who are struggling just like we were. Maybe we can create a little support system here right in your restaurant." The owner's eyes widened. "That's a wonderful idea, but I don't know if I can manage it alone." "You won't be alone," she said softly. "We can help and the community will too. People want to do good, they just need someone to guide them." Together they started small. They created a space in the restaurant where children could draw, people could leave clothes for those in need, and anyone struggling could come for a hot meal or a kind word. The child contributed by decorating the space with his drawings, while the grandmother helped organize supplies and coordinate visits. The restaurant slowly transformed into a hub of compassion, a place where people could find hope, creativity, and support. News of the restaurant's new purpose began to spread. Customers shared stories with friends and family, and some even volunteered to help. Donations came in: blankets, food, clothes, and art supplies. The owner felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The restaurant had always been his livelihood, but now it had become a place that truly made a difference. One afternoon, a visitor came to the restaurant with an unexpected offer. A local journalist, hearing about the child's talent and the restaurant's community work, wanted to write a story. The grandmother and child were nervous at first, but the owner encouraged them. "This isn't about fame," he said. "It's about showing the world that kindness matters, that small acts can change lives." The journalist spent hours talking with the child, admiring his drawings and listening to the grandmother's story. The resulting article was published in the local newspaper, highlighting the child's talent and the restaurant's growing role as a beacon of hope. The community response was overwhelming. People offered more support, some even suggesting sponsorship for the child's education and art classes. The owner watched all of this unfold with quiet pride. What had started as a simple act, inviting two strangers in from the cold, had grown into something much larger. He realized that life had a way of rewarding compassion in ways one could never predict. By simply noticing the needs of others, he had helped not only the grandmother and child, but had inspired an entire community. The child, now more confident and hopeful, began attending art workshops arranged with the support of local volunteers. His skills improved rapidly, and he started entering small competitions. The grandmother, who had always been cautious and protective, watched with growing pride and relief, knowing that her grandson's future was beginning to take shape. One evening, as the restaurant closed and the lights dimmed, the grandmother approached the owner with a small gift, a handcrafted bracelet for him and a drawing for the restaurant walls. "It's a token of our gratitude," she said, "for believing in us when no one else did, for giving us hope, and for showing us the power of kindness." The owner held the bracelet and looked at the drawing. The bracelet was simple but carefully made, and the drawing depicted a restaurant filled with laughter, warmth, and joy. He felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. It was a reminder of how one small decision, to open the door to those in need, could ripple outwards in ways he could never have imagined. That night, as he reflected on the events of the past few weeks, he realized something profound. Life wasn't about accumulating wealth or working tirelessly for success. It was about connection, compassion, and leaving a positive impact on others. The grandmother and child had changed his perspective forever. Their courage, gratitude, and resilience had taught him that small gestures of love and care could create life-altering transformations. He also noticed that his own staff had been inspired. They were more patient with customers, more generous in spirit, and more aware of the struggles people faced. The restaurant had become not just a place to eat, but a place where values of empathy and kindness were lived every day. In the weeks that followed, the grandmother and child continued to visit regularly. Each visit was filled with stories, laughter, and learning. The child's art continued to grow, and he began to dream of a career in drawing or design. The grandmother found small jobs and community connections, slowly building stability and security. And the owner, quietly watching all of this, felt a deep sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced before. One evening, as the restaurant emptied and the city grew quiet, the owner sat in his office and reflected on the journey. He remembered the cold night when he had first seen the grandmother and child standing outside, lost and hungry. At the time, it had seemed like a small decision, just a meal, a place to rest. But that night had set off a chain of events that had changed all their lives. He smiled to himself, realizing that life often worked in unexpected ways. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage and compassion could lead to the most remarkable outcomes. And in helping others, he had discovered a new purpose and a sense of joy that could never be measured in money or success. The grandmother and child's presence continued to inspire him every day. Their resilience, gratitude, and dreams reminded him that even in the face of hardship, hope could flourish. And he knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they had created a space where kindness, creativity, and human connection could thrive, a place where anyone who entered could feel seen, cared for, and valued. As the moon rose over the quiet city streets, the owner turned off the lights, leaving the restaurant warm and welcoming for tomorrow. He felt a quiet peace, knowing that his life and the lives of the grandmother and child had been forever changed by a single act of kindness. And in that peaceful moment, he understood the most important lesson of all, that when people open their hearts to others, even in the smallest ways, they can create ripples that transform the world. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The grandmother and child continued to visit the restaurant regularly, but now their visits carried a different kind of purpose. What had begun as a desperate search for a safe place had grown into something far greater. The child was thriving, his art skills improving, and the grandmother had found a sense of security she had not known in years. The owner watched all of this quietly, feeling a sense of fulfillment that went beyond anything money or success could give. The restaurant was no longer just a business, it had become a hub of hope, a place where kindness could flourish, and where people were reminded of the goodness that existed in the world. One morning, the grandmother came in with a small package. "We have something for you," she said softly, handing it to the owner. Inside was a collection of the child's drawings carefully bound together. Each page was filled with vibrant colors, scenes of joy, hope, and imagination. The owner leafed through them slowly, a smile spreading across his face. These were not just drawings. They were a record of growth, confidence, and the power of believing in someone. The child looked up shyly. "I wanted you to have these," he said, "because you helped me see that I could do more than just survive." The owner knelt down to his level. "These are amazing," he said, "and I hope you keep going no matter what. You have a gift and you should never stop sharing it." Over time, the grandmother found small jobs through community connections that had formed around the restaurant. She was no longer living in fear or uncertainty. She was building a stable life for herself and her grandson, and the owner's support had made this possible. She would often stop by to thank him, her voice filled with quiet pride and gratitude. "You didn't just help us," she said one day. "You gave us a future. You showed us that kindness can truly change lives." The child continued to attend art workshops and mentorship programs that the owner had helped arrange. Each week he would return with new stories, sketches, and ideas. His confidence grew steadily, and he began dreaming bigger, imagining a life filled with possibilities that once seemed impossible. He even started helping younger children in the neighborhood, teaching them basic drawing skills and sharing the kindness he had received. The owner noticed the ripple effect of his initial act of compassion. What had started as a simple decision to offer a meal and a safe place for one night had now created a chain of positive changes. His employees had become more involved, volunteering their time and energy to support the community space in the restaurant. Local customers had also contributed, inspired by the story of the grandmother and child. One afternoon, a visitor came to the restaurant unexpectedly, a local community leader who had heard about the child's talent and the restaurant's growing impact. She praised the owner for creating such a meaningful space and suggested organizing a small exhibition for the child's artwork. The owner was surprised and honored. He never sought recognition. He had only acted out of compassion. But now the community wanted to celebrate the difference that kindness could make. The grandmother and child were nervous but excited about the exhibition. The child carefully selected his best pieces and the grandmother helped display them with care. The exhibition was a small but significant event, attended by neighbors, customers, and local supporters. Everyone was amazed by the child's talent, but more importantly, they were inspired by the story behind the art, the story of a restaurant owner who had opened his heart and changed 2 lives forever. During the exhibition, the child stood beside the owner and whispered, "I want to draw for more people like you helped me. I want to help others too." The owner smiled, his eyes glistening. You already are, he said. Every smile you bring, every little moment of joy you create is your way of helping. As the months went on, the grandmother and child became an integral part of the restaurant community. They participated in small events, shared their story with new visitors, and contributed to the space that had become a safe haven for many. The child's art adorned the walls, reminding everyone who entered of the power of resilience, hope, and kindness. The owner continued to reflect on how a single decision had set all of this in motion. It had been as simple as opening the door to two strangers in need, yet it had transformed lives in ways he could never have predicted. He realized that life often presented moments of choice, moments where one could act out of fear, indifference, or hesitation, or moments where one could choose compassion and courage. That night, when he had let the grandmother and child stay, he had chosen the latter. And the results had been extraordinary. One evening, after the restaurant had closed and the city streets were quiet, the grandmother and child stayed behind to help tidy up. The child carefully placed his latest drawings in a folder, while the grandmother folded blankets and organized supplies for the community corner. The owner watched them, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and connection. "You know," the grandmother said softly, "I used to think life was just about surviving, but now I see it's about giving, sharing, and believing in others. And that belief, it can change everything." The owner nodded. "I feel the same way. You've taught me that the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact, and that life is truly about the connections we make and the lives we touch." The child looked up with a smile. "I want to help more people too, just like you did for me." "You already are," the owner said, kneeling beside him. "And one day you'll help even more." The grandmother placed a hand on the owner's shoulder. "Thank you," she said simply. "For everything. For believing in us when no one else did. For giving us hope, safety, and a future." The owner felt a lump in his throat. He had never expected to feel so fulfilled, so alive through helping others. That one night had grown into a journey that changed everyone involved. He realized that life's true value was measured not by wealth or success, but by the positive impact one had on others. In the following months, the restaurant's community work grew even further. The owner arranged free meals for those in need, art workshops for children, and small support programs for struggling families. The grandmother and child continued to play a central role, helping organize and contribute. The restaurant had become a symbol of hope, kindness, and human connection in the neighborhood. One day, the child received a letter from a well-known art school, inviting him to attend a special summer program. The grandmother's hands trembled with excitement as she showed the letter to the owner. "He's going to have a chance to learn and grow," she said. "All because of you." The owner smiled, feeling a deep sense of joy. "No," he said softly, "because of all of us. You, him, and this community. We did this together." The child hugged him tightly, a small but meaningful gesture. "I'll never forget you," he whispered. And in that moment, the owner understood something powerful. Life had a way of giving back to those who chose kindness. The grandmother and child's journey from hardship to hope was a living testament to that truth. As the restaurant lights dimmed that evening, the owner walked through the quiet space, reflecting on everything that had happened. The walls adorned with the child's drawings seemed to tell a story of resilience, hope, and transformation. The tables, once empty and routine, now held memories of laughter, connection, and shared meals. And the quiet corners, once just storage and space, had become a sanctuary for those who needed it most. The owner realized that the greatest gift he had received was not recognition, money, or even success. It was the sense of fulfillment and purpose that came from helping others. He had witnessed firsthand how small acts of kindness could grow into life-changing moments, how hope could be restored in the most unexpected ways, and how love and care could ripple out to touch countless lives. The grandmother and child had found safety, hope, and opportunity. The child had discovered his talent and confidence, and the grandmother had found stability and peace. And the owner, through this journey, had discovered the true meaning of life. That the power to change the world often begins with the courage to act with compassion, even in small ways. As the night fell and the city slept, the restaurant stood quiet, warm, and welcoming, a symbol of what was possible when people chose kindness over fear, hope over despair, and action over indifference. And in that space, 3 lives had been forever changed, bound together by a simple act of humanity that grew into something extraordinary. The owner knew that life would continue to bring challenges, as it always did. But he also knew that with an open heart, courage, and compassion, even the smallest actions could create ripples that touched the lives of many. He looked at the child's drawings one last time for the night, feeling gratitude, hope, and a quiet joy that he had never felt before. The grandmother and child were asleep in their safe corner, and the owner turned off the lights, leaving the restaurant ready for another day. The journey they had shared together had not only changed their lives, but it had also transformed the owner, the staff, and the community around them. And as he stepped out into the cool night air, he smiled, knowing that a single act of kindness, simple, human, and genuine, had created a legacy far greater than he could have imagined. It had changed lives, restored hope, and reminded everyone involved that compassion was the greatest gift of all.